I was on a call last week with a couple moving here from the Bay Area. Good people, 2 kids, a dog, the whole thing. And the wife says to me, kind of quiet, almost apologizing, she goes, "We keep reading that people like us are the reason that locals can't buy a house in Utah. Are we the problem?" And I didn't have a clean answer for her. Because if you live on the Wasatch Front right now, you've felt it. You watched a starter home in your own neighborhood, the one you grew up 2 streets over from here, go 35 grand over asking price during the peak of the market to somebody with a moving truck and out-of-state license plates. And it makes you angry. It's supposed to make you angry. So here's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to take the single most popular explanation for why Utah got unaffordable. It's the Californians, and I'm going to actually run the numbers on it on camera, and I'll be honest with you up front. The answer is messier and frankly more uncomfortable than either side of this fight wants it to be. Because by the end of this, I don't think you're going to be mad at the people in the moving trucks anymore, even the Californians. I think you're going to be mad at something else entirely. Let's get into it. If you're new here, my name is Scott Steele. I'm a real estate agent here in Utah, and most of what I do all day is help people move into the state of Utah, which means, yeah, some of the people are frustrated with me. Yeah, for sure. I'm the guy holding the door open for them. So you might think that I'm the last person who'd tell you the truth about this, and I'd argue I'm the only one with a reason to actually understand it because I watched this happen one transaction at a time, in real life, not in a comment section. I have 2 to 10 people reaching out to me every single day. And here's the common belief, and I want to say this as fairly as I possibly can because it's not crazy. And the story goes like this. Californians sold a tiny house out west for what? $1 million or $2 million? They show up here with a pile of cash. They don't even blink at a Utah price tag because to them, it's at a big discount. They waive the inspection, they offer way over asking price, and a regular Utah family making a regular Utah salary literally cannot compete. Multiply that by tens of thousands of people, and that's why your kid can't buy a house. That's the belief, and honestly, parts of it are true. I've watched the cash offer thing happen with my own 2 eyes. But here's where I'm going to break with the crowd. After looking at the actual migration data and the actual price data, I don't think the Californians are the cause. I think they're the most visible symptom of a problem that started years before most of them ever even got here. Blaming them is like blaming the ambulance for the car crash. It's loud, it's right there, it showed up at the scene, but it's not what hit you. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. Everything I'm about to show you comes from the Kempsey-Gardner Policy Institute at the University of Utah, the U.S. Census Bureau, and Redfin's market data. These are the same numbers the state economists are looking at every single day. I'm just going to connect them in a way that nobody seems to want to do out loud. So here's the plan for the next 20 minutes or so. First, I'm going to show you the one number that basically settles whether Californians are big enough to move this whole entire market. Then I'll show you where they're actually landing because it is not evenly spread, and that matters a lot for you specifically. Then we're going to talk about the salary trap, which is the part that affects locals more than any out-of-state buyer ever could. Then the lock-in effect, the reason there's nothing for sale in the first place. And I'm saving the biggest one for last because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and it changes who you're actually mad at. Stick with me because each one of these builds on the last one before it. So let's start with the number. Okay, the number that ends the argument. Here's the question that actually matters. Are there even enough Californians to do what we're accusing them of in the first place? Everybody argues about whether it's their fault. Almost nobody checks whether it's mathematically even possible or if it's happening, so let's check. In 2022, and this is the Kempsey-Gardner Policy Institute pulling data from the census data of about 41,700 people who moved to Utah from another state that year. Of those, roughly 18,700 came from California. So Californians were the single largest out-of-state group. That's for certain. That part of the story is completely real. 1 in 5 movers into the state of Utah was a Californian. If you feel like you're seeing more California plates, you are not imagining it. You are right. But now zoom out because this is where it gets interesting. If only 1 out of 5 is coming from California, that means 4 out of 5 are coming from somewhere else. Utah has roughly 3.5 million people. We've been adding around 60,000 people per year, and a huge chunk of that growth isn't even migration, it's babies. Utah has one of the highest birth rates in the entire country every single year. So when you take 18,000 California arrivals and set them against a state of 3.5 million people and the tens of thousands of locals who are also out there trying to buy, the Californians are a real factor. But they are nowhere near a big enough group to single-handedly set the price of every home from Ogden to St. George. Let me put it in terms that you can feel. On any given street that's turning over, for every one out-of-state buyer with a moving truck, there are several local buyers, young families, people relocating for a tech job, folks moving up from their first house. The California buyer is just the one that you notice because the plate is right there in the driveway. The local who could outbid your friend last month, you never saw them. They blended in. So here's why this matters for the whole rest of the video. If Californians were genuinely big enough to control the market, then the solution would be simple. Slow them down and prices fix themselves. But they're not big enough for that, which means something else is doing most of the work. And if we spend all of our anger on the 18,000 people that we can see, we never go looking for the real thing that's actually 4 or 5 times more powerful. So hold that thought, because where these buyers land is the next piece. And it explains exactly why it feels so much worse in some neighborhoods than others. Look, here's something that completely reframed this for me personally. The out-of-state buyers are not spread evenly across Utah like butter. They concentrate hard in very specific places. And that concentration is the reason that your experience of this crisis depends almost entirely on which zip code you're standing in. The Kempsey-Garner Policy Institute's research on California in-migrants specifically is wild when you actually read it. Utah County pulled in about 28% of all of the California movers, with the heaviest landing zones being Saratoga Springs, the Lehigh area, and down toward Payson. Salt Lake County took in roughly another 23%, and then a meaningful slice goes down to Washington County, the St. George area. So you've got a few pockets absorbing the bulk of it. Now, here's how you use that. If you're a local buyer feeling completely priced out, where you're shopping matters enormously. The head-to-head bidding war against the cash out-of-state buyer is most intense in exactly those corridors. The Silicon Slope spine through Lehigh and Saratoga Springs, where the tech jobs and the new master plan communities and the relocating families all stack on top of each other. That's the pressure cooker. That's where the over-asking waive everything offers are most common, because that's where the demand is most concentrated. But 15-20 minutes off of that spine, the dynamic changes entirely. Submarkets that aren't on the relocation hot list, parts of the west side, certain pockets up north toward Ogden, communities that don't show up on the best places to move to Utah listicles, those don't have the same out-of-state pile-on. And I'm not telling you they're cheap. Nothing in Utah is cheap anymore. I'm telling you the competition you're up against is very different, and that's something you can actually plan around instead of just being angry about it. And one more thing the data quietly tells us, because I promised you honestly, nearly 1 in 4 of those California in-migrants were actually born in Utah. These are Utahns coming back home, people who left for a job or for school and are moving back to raise their kids near grandparents. So a real chunk of the invasion you're picturing is your own neighbors and cousins with a California address on their license plate. That should complicate the story just a little. It sure did for me. So now we've gone from Californians are ruining Utah to something a little more precise, a specific, identifiable set of buyers concentrating in a specific, identifiable set of corridors. And a good number of them are returning locals. That's a problem that you can navigate, but it still doesn't explain why even the locals who aren't competing with anyone from out of state feel like they're drowning. For that, we have to talk about the trap. And this one's about you, not about them. Okay, the salary trap. Here's the part that I think hurts Utah families more than any out-of-state buyer ever has, and almost nobody frames it like this anymore. It's not just that home prices went up, it's that home prices went up and local wages did not keep pace. There's a gap between the two, and that gap is the real squeeze. The state's own economists made this point flat out in the annual economic report to the governor. Utah's median home price puts us somewhere around the 7th to 10th most expensive housing market in the entire country. But our median wages, they rank well below that. Sit with that for just a second. We've got top 10 housing prices on roughly middle of the pack paychecks. That mismatch is the trap. Economists measure this with something called the median multiple. You just take the median home price and divide it by the median household income. Anything above about 5 is considered severely unaffordable. A little over a decade ago in 2014, Utah was sitting around 3.5. Borderline, but workable. By 2022, we hit about 5.7. We didn't just cross the unaffordable line, we blew past it. Let me make that concrete because the ratio is abstract until it's affecting your life. To comfortably carry a mortgage on a typical Salt Lake City home, you realistically need a household income up around $120,000 to $140,000. The actual median household income in the city is well under that, closer to the low 90s. That is the gap. That is why a nurse and a teacher who both have good, stable, respectable jobs, the exact people that Utah is supposed to be built for, do the math, get to the bottom, and realize they're short. Not because a Californian outbid them on one specific house, because the whole price to paycheck relationship in this state quietly broke. And here's the cruel twist. When an out-of-state buyer shows up with equity from selling a coastal home, they're not subject to this trap because they're not buying with a Utah paycheck. They're buying with California's home equity. So the same house that represents an impossible stretch for a local family is a comfortable, even cheap purchase for someone arriving with $500,000 of West Coast equity in their pocket. Same house, same price, completely different math depending on which economy your money came from. So now you can see why just being mad at the Californians misses it. Even if every out-of-state buyer vanished tomorrow, the salary trap would still be sitting here because it's baked into the relationship between Utah prices and Utah wages. The out-of-state equity makes the gap more visible and more painful in the hottest corridors, but it didn't create the gap. So what did? To answer that, we have to ask why there's almost nothing for sale to begin with, and that's next. All right, we've talked about who's buying and how the math breaks for locals, but there's a piece underneath all of it that turns a tight market into a brutal one. There's barely anything for sale, and a huge reason for that has nothing to do with anybody moving here. It's the people who are already here and refuse to move. Here's the mechanism. More than 60% of Utah mortgage holders have an interest rate under 4%. They locked those in during the cheap money years before rates jumped in 2022. Today, a 30-year mortgage is running somewhere in the mid 6s or even the high 6s. So picture you're one of those homeowners. You've got a 3% rate. The second you sell your house and buy another one, you trade that 3% for a 6.5% rate. On the same size loan, that can mean hundreds of dollars more per month for the exact same house. So you do the rational thing. You just stay put. Now, multiply that decision by hundreds of thousands of households. All those people who would normally be the natural sellers, the empty nesters ready to downsize, the family that outgrew the starter home, the folks who'd normally move up a rung, they're frozen. They're not listing, which means the starter homes don't free up, the move-up homes don't free up, and the whole ladder that's supposed to keep inventory circulating just seizes. And here's how that connects back to everything else. When supply is choked off like this, you don't need a huge number of buyers to create a bidding war. You just need a few motivated ones chasing very few houses. So when an out-of-state buyer with cash does show up, the damage they do is amplified because they're competing over a tiny pool of available homes that should be 3 times bigger. The Californian didn't shrink the supply. The lock-in effect did. The out-of-state buyer just walked into an already empty store and grabbed the last item on the shelf right in front of you. And the slightly hopeful part of this does loosen over time. Life doesn't care about your interest rate. People get new jobs, have more kids, get divorced, retire, pass away. Gradually, those locked-in homes do come a little bit back onto the market. And we're already seeing inventory tick up year over year, but it's a slow drip, not a flood. So in the meantime, the scarcity is real and it's mostly homegrown. So stack it up. We've got a buyer pool that's larger than locals realize, but smaller than the panic suggests. We've got a wage to price trap that's punishing locals regardless of who moves here. And now we've got a supply that's been artificially frozen by our own neighbors' rate locks. Every one of these is bigger than the Californians, but there's one more layer underneath all of them, the one that actually sets the whole thing into motion. And I saved it for last on purpose because this is the one that changes who you're mad at. So here it is. Everything we've talked about so far, the migration, the wage gap, the frozen supply, sits on top of one root cause: And once you see it, the whole blame game falls apart. The real reason that Utah got unaffordable is that for over a decade, we did not build enough homes to keep up with the people we already had, let alone the ones moving here. Think back to where the state was after the 2008 crash. The home building industry got gutted. Builders went under, lending dried up, and construction crawled for so many years. But people didn't stop being born. The Utah's birth rate is one of the highest in the nation. We kept making Utahns the whole time. So you had a decade plus where the population kept climbing, not from migration, from our own growing families, while home building limped along underneath it. That's the hole that we dug ourselves. We entered the 2020s with a structural housing shortage that was years in the making. So now run the whole movie back with that as the opening scene. You start with a deep, self-inflicted shortage of homes. Then a wave of remote work and a hot tech corridor pours new demand on top, yes, including those Californians, but also our own kids forming households. Then rates spike and the lock-in effect freezes what little supply was circulating. Then equity-rich out-of-state buyers show up and win the few bidding wars that remain. Every single one of those forces is real, but they're all just pressure landing on a foundation that was already cracked. If we'd built enough homes for 15 years, the Californians show up to a market with breathing room and barely move the needle. We didn't. So they show up to a pressure cooker and they look like the cause. And this is the part that should genuinely change how you feel. The thing that determines whether your kids can afford to live in the state they grew up in is not how many moving trucks have California plates. It's whether we build, permits, zoning, density, the boring city council fights about whether to allow townhomes and smaller lots and apartments near the freeway. That unglamorous stuff is the actual lever. The state's own demographers have basically said the quiet part out loud, making it possible for Utah's own children and grandchildren to start households here is both an economic and a moral problem. And the answer is housing supply. So here's the whole thing in one breath. We blamed the most visible group, the out-of-state buyers, especially those from California, for a crisis that was actually built over a decade of not building enough. The Californians are our real factor, concentrated in real corridors, and they make the squeeze more visible and more painful for sure. But the squeeze itself, the wage gap, the frozen supply, the empty shelves, well, that's homegrown. We did that, which is actually the good news if you think about it, because the things we did to ourselves are the things we have the power to undo and to fix. Okay, let's bring it home. We started with that woman on the Zoom call asking me if she was the problem. And here's my honest answer, now that we've actually walked the numbers. No, the out-of-state buyers aren't ruining Utah. They're one real ingredient, the most visible one, in a much bigger recipe. We saw the migration is real, but too small to move the whole market alone. We saw it concentrates in specific corridors, and that a quarter of those Californians are actually Utahns coming back home. We saw the salary trap that punishes locals no matter who moves here. We saw the lock-in effect freezing supply from the inside. And underneath all of it, the underbuilding decade that dug the hole in the first place. So if you came into this video angry at the people in the moving trucks, and I get it, I really do, I hope you're walking out of it pointed at something a little more useful. Because you can't vote a Californian off of the island, but you absolutely can show up to a zoning and planning meeting. You can support building more homes near where the jobs are located. You can stop letting the loudest, most visible explanation eat all of your attention while the real lever sits there unpulled. And here's the one practical thing nobody tells locals. If you're a Utah buyer feeling boxed out, the single highest leverage move is to shop deliberately off the relocation hot list corridors. The data literally tells you where the out-of-state demand concentrates. So go where it doesn't. You will not be cheaper, but you will not be standing in the same line as the equity-rich buyer waiving every contingency. That one strategic choice, location relative to the relocation map, can be the difference between winning a house and writing your 9th losing offer. Most local buyers never think about it, and now you will. And look, if you're trying to figure out which corridors make sense for your specific budget and your specific situation, that's literally the thing I do every single day. I put together a guide. You can download that. You can find that in a link in the description of this video or in the pinned comment on this and every other video. And as always, my team and I are here to be your real estate resource of choice. If you are looking to make a move to or within the state of Utah, reach reach out to me. Let's start the conversation and give you the guidance that's really right there for you to make sure that you land in the best place for you. And if this is the type of content that really helps you, please subscribe to this channel for more videos that will help you down this path. And if you're looking to learn more about Utah and life here, check out these videos next. And until the next video, thanks.